So is there any there in the Republicans' allegations against Hunter Biden and Joe Biden? Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm also a lawyer and an academic, and I'm here to help you stand up to the BS of the MAGA crowd. So I feel like we keep visiting this issue again and again and again and again. It's almost like the Benghazi hearings. Remember those? Those produce nothing as well, but this is what Republicans do. They just spew innuendo and allegations and false claims. But if you watch Fox News, you'd believe that there is ample evidence of a huge bribery scheme that the president put into effect with his son's assistance. Now, I think it's important to make one point before we go any further on this, which is that Joe Biden is obviously an intelligent guy. I mean, he made it to be president of the United States, for crying out loud. He's a lawyer and a former Senate leader who worked with Barack Obama, a pretty intelligent guy, I'm pretty sure. His son, Hunter, is clearly the black sheep of the family, to put it nicely. He's had problems with drugs, and he's clearly been someone who's made some questionable decisions about ways that he's tried to parlay the family name into employment. I remember the debate when Donald Trump started attacking Hunter Biden, and Joe's response was very moving, especially to me, a parent of a child who has struggled with drug addiction, and many parents across America, when his response was, "I love my son, and I'm proud of him," which is exactly how I feel about my daughter. That being said, if I were to try to execute an illegal scheme to try to bribe foreign leaders, I probably would not enlist my daughter to help me with it, much as I'm pretty sure Joe Biden would not enlist Hunter Biden to help him with it. There are much more competent family members he could have relied upon for that assistance. What's more is just because Hunter Biden has done some questionable things to try to earn money, like selling his artwork or taking a job with a Ukrainian company or setting up a business to represent Chinese nationals. Those are all things that Joe Biden knew he was doing and kept at arm's length. But he also understood he couldn't control his son. He doesn't get to make his decisions. His son is an adult. Just as, frankly, my daughter makes some choices that I don't necessarily agree with. That doesn't mean I love her any less. That doesn't mean I don't respect her. That doesn't mean I'm not proud of her. But it does mean that I understand her limitations, as I'm sure Joe understands of Hunter. Now, that being said, let's just visit these allegations for 1 second, because I saw on Fox News where they were talking about all this evidence of bribery of the president. Well, let's just break it down here. There are essentially claims that President Biden was involved in getting money illegally from two sources, China and Ukraine. Now let's break down the basis of these allegations one at a time. The allegations regarding Ukraine essentially come back to a job that Hunter Biden took with Burisma, a Ukrainian energy company. Allegedly, Hunter Biden was hired to try to get his father to pressure the government of Ukraine to fire the prosecutor who is investigating Burisma's owner. Okay, if you're not confused now, it gets better. Now remember, this is the allegation that Donald Trump tried to get Volodymyr Zelensky to back up in exchange for getting the weapons that were due to Ukraine, a demand that resulted in him being impeached. So it's not like the Trump administration was not trying to investigate this and find some evidence of it. It went so far as Donald Trump essentially trying to pressure a foreign leader to lie about it to assist him. So if there was evidence, it would have come out. What's more is there are questions as to whether this prosecutor actually was investigating the owner of Burisma. He claims it is now. That doesn't really jive with the record, but let's just accept that for a second. Here's the fundamental problem with the claim that the Republicans are making. When Hunter Biden was hired by this company, it was already U.S. policy that they wanted to see this prosecutor removed. This prosecutor was corrupt, and so the United States was pushing very strongly to have him removed. So in other words, he was allegedly hired by this Ukrainian company to convince his father, who doesn't have the ability to set American policy unilaterally, but to convince his father to take a policy position that the United States government had already taken. Later on a mission from the president, Vice President Biden did go to Ukraine to push the Ukrainians to take action on this prosecutor. But again, this was not something that Vice President Biden himself was doing. This was American policy that was well established at that point and was coming through any number of channels diplomatically. So if they hired Hunter Biden to convince Joe Biden to do this, it was done when there was nothing left to convince. That was pretty poorly spent money if that's what they were trying to accomplish. Now, in support of their allegations, Republicans claim that they have audio tapes with the vice president speaking with officials referencing this bribery scheme. This source is allegedly some former Burisma executive. But yet Republicans have basically admitted they don't have such tapes. And Comer, the head of the investigative committee, admitted that nobody has heard from this informant for more than 3 years. So he claims that somebody they haven't talked to, who they can't identify, has tapes that they don't have, alleging that Joe Biden received money to push a policy that the United States government had already adopted. Does that sound like a strong case to you? Well, wait until you hear the next one. This is one of my favorites. The claim is that Hunter Biden had a business which earned quite a bit of money, to the tune of millions of dollars for sure, from Chinese sources. Now, this is once more an example of Hunter Biden trying to play on the family name, much as he did with the artwork, something I criticized a long time ago in a prior video. But here's the critical point that you need to remember, is that when this supposed transaction took place, when Hunter Biden was getting all this money from the Chinese to influence Joe Biden was no longer vice president. This was in 2017 and 2018 that Hunter Biden had this income stream. In other words, Joe Biden was just a private citizen at that point. He wasn't even running for president. And as you may recall, until Joe Biden won the South Carolina primary in 2020, it really wasn't looking like he was going to be the nominee. So the key point to remember with Ukrainian allegations are that they essentially were paying money to Hunter Biden to get him to convince Joe Biden to set up a policy that the United States government had already adopted. With the Chinese allegation, you need to remember that Hunter Biden was receiving money from the Chinese at a time that Joe Biden no longer had any influence to sell. He wasn't an elected official anymore, and he wasn't looking like he was going to be one anytime soon. Now, this is where the story gets a little more interesting, though, which is that it's just come out that one of the key sources of this story, an individual known as Gal Luft, was actually a arms dealer who is trying to do deals with the Iranians and the Chinese and various other bad actors on the global stage. And as a result, he was just indicted for that by the Justice Department. This is the very credible source that the Comer Committee in Congress has been relying upon. The only other claim that you might have heard about is about this whistleblower who supposedly has revealed information as being hidden by the FBI. This whistleblower, though, is based upon a document that the FBI took in, which they take in whenever they get an unverified lead. So in other words, someone calls them up and says, hey, here's an example of some criminal activity you should investigate. Since it's unverified, they will then proceed to investigate it, which the FBI did. And they found there to be no basis for the allegations against Joe Biden. These are just more allegations of bribery, blah, 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 the same stuff that we've been talking about. But this whistleblower was supposedly covered up by the FBI. The problem, though, that the Republicans are dealing with is that the head of the FBI, who is supposedly covering it over for the Republicans, is Christopher Wray, a Republican appointed by Trump, who said in testimony, quite correctly, that it's insane, ludicrous, and absurd that people would think he is acting on behalf of the Bidens. What's more is the prosecutor who decided not to pursue these charges any further and who did the plea deal with Hunter Biden to address his failure to pay his taxes, for crying out loud, and getting a gun when he's not supposed to because he's a convicted felon, which last I heard the Republicans are for, but that's neither here nor there, that this prosecutor was also a Republican appointed by Trump, and that Biden asked him to stay in office despite the fact that he was investigating his son because of the fact that he wanted to make sure there was no appearance of impropriety. If that sounds like a criminal mastermind to you, I don't know how you would show people that someone's honest. So if you've been getting nervous hearing all this smoke and mirrors about Hunter Biden and how the whole Biden crime family that they talk about on Fox News is going to come crashing down, remember this. There is absolutely no basis to these claims. The people who've been investigating the Bidens are all Republicans who've all said that there is no evidence to support any criminal activity on the part of the president, that the supposed China bribery took place while Joe Biden was a private citizen. He wasn't even in office anymore. And the supposed Ukraine bribery took place supposedly to convince the government to adopt a policy they'd already adopted. And finally, the whistleblower was thoroughly investigated, again, by Republican investigators and found not to be credible. Well, if you want to see more about all these allegations against Hunter Biden, check out this video over here. I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.